school was, when I was in the grade school, I went to the Grayson graded school except for my third grade and the fourth, well, I had to start all over. That's a wild story there. We were janitors at the school, my family was, and that's when the school was over, well, we'd go up and sweep out all the classrooms and pick up all the garbage and put it in a basket outside. And so we was in the schools quite a bit and around them. But I went to up to Leatherwood from the third grade, and I graduated. Excuse me. I was promoted from the third grade to the fourth grade, and Blanche's school was over in I think last of January. They quit teaching. They didn't have much school. So I was already in the fourth grade. So when I came back home, they said, well, you're not going to sit around the house here. You got to go to school. So I went to school, and they said, well, we'll just put you in the fourth grade. So I went to third grade and the fourth grade in the same year. And that was, it was interesting. But, you know, you had a lot of, I don't think you have now, you had bullies in them days, really, we thought they were. And well, they were bigger than we were, because I know I was always some girl in our class, and when we got your paper done, while you held your hand up, you know, in the class, and I was always the first or second. She was sometimes first, but I'd hold my hand up when I got mine done, and the guy behind me, a big old ugly looking thing, Amos Arms, red-headed, he'd grab my arm, twist around behind, give me that paper, and so I'd have to give him my paper and turn around and do it again.
Oh man!
I had to do mine twice. But he and I both done good in school.
That's funny.
We done very good.
That is something else.
That was the third and fourth grade, and then we went on to, well, when I was in the second grade also, seemed like my life had been a lot of fighting. But it was, you know, it was a survival sort of thing then, and you didn't have any toys, so what you had to do. In the second grade, there was a guy named Junior Lyons, who was about my age and size, and he was a little feisty, and we got crosswise on the playground, and we got into it, and we was slugging it out, and the teacher come and grabbed one by one arm, one by the other, and took us in the house and bent us over the desk and worked out on us with a ruler. And when we got through, I told him, I said, one thing, you got two whippings, I just got one. So I almost got another one from her then, because...
For bragging about it?
Yeah, bragging about it.
Well, what were your best and worst subjects?
Well, I excelled in anything to do with math, seemed like. I never had any problems with that, and when I got into high school, I didn't even have to take the test. She gave me straight A's completely, and I always helped her with, you know, improving things in the class and so on. And I went to we used to go every year. We go to some other big school. I want to think there was a big school in Ashland that we went to one time for scholastic achievements. And we took tests along with the schools of the other, the best students of the other schools in the neighborhood. And I always went for mathematics, and one time we didn't have, our school didn't have a classification for extemporaneous speaking. And they come and says, can you do extemporaneous speaking? I said, I don't know what it is. So they said, well, you just got to get up there and talk off the top of your head. And I said, well, I can do that. And so they gave you a subject, and you didn't know what it was until you opened it up. And then you had 3 minutes to make up a speech about it. So I got mine. I can't remember what it was, and I can't remember what I did, but I finished, I got a good rating. Of course, there was 3 excellent and something and good, and I got a good rating, so they'll figure I did too well there. But anyway, that's every year we went, but it's different than that. There was a social aspects there, because I remember a young girl that we went to a movies Capitol Theater in Ashland. It's on Winchester. I think it's gone now. But we went to the movies there, and this young lady was, of course, I was tall for a sophomore. I believe I was a sophomore, yeah. And of course, and then in the dark, you can't tell one from the other. We socialized there, and we got out, and she said, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I said, I don't know. It's 2 or 3 years before I graduate. She said, aren't you a senior? And I said, no. And so, she was embarrassed because she was a senior and she had collaborated with an underclassmate. But, it was all in good fun, I reckon.
So you attended Leatherwood. Is that where you started school?
No, I went to Grayson Graded School the first 2 years, and we walked across the hill from the farm to get to Grayson Graded School. You probably don't remember where it was. Well, it was what is now in Grayson was on Hill Street.
Okay.
And it was 1 block south of Main Street. There was a big old 2-story building there that had 8 classrooms in it. And that was the Grayson Graded School. And that's where I went to, I went the first 5 or 6 years. 5 or 6 years, and then we moved down to Pritchard High School, and I went to junior high there, and then I finished my high school at Pritchard High School.
What school activities or sports did you participate in?
Well, I participated in basketball and baseball, and I tried football, but the time I got to be 8th or 9th grade, they took football out of the... But I had an interesting story about that. Some little girl come up to me and says, boy, I'd like to see you get in the ball game. And I said, I know it. I said, you like the way I play? She said, no. But when you get in the game, we know we're so far ahead we can't lose. So that was a backsided compliment.
Well, it was. That was the left-handed and right-handed compliment.
Yeah, that wasn't all there. But the school was... they eventually tore that school down. And then we moved into Pritchard High School. And Pritchard High School had a junior high and senior high. And WPA built another classroom section on the end of it. And then they started having all the school there. The first, all 12 grades was there at Pritchard High School. So that was my school. And we was, I liked basketball because one thing, we got out of class to go to the last period. We go to the gym to practice. And then I was playing, but I also had to take a steady job. I was projectionist when I was 14, 15, and mostly 16. Well, until I graduated. I was movie operator at the Clark Theater and the Gray Theater, which is a wild story in itself. And so when it come to basketball playing nights, I'd get the projector started, and I'd run the first 2 reels, and then that's when the B team was playing, and then I'd run the first 2 reels, and I had a Murphy that came in there and showed him how to change from, just had 3 reels, in the weekday movies. And he could change over to the 3rd reel and then just shut everything down. And I'd come back after I played ball and fix everything up and get it ready for the next day. And I was working for Buster Clark, and we did that for quite a while till he caught on to it. But I enjoyed that because sometimes I'd run down and just get there about the time that maybe they'd already played a quarter, and then I'd get to jump in there and play for a while, and then when they started playing out of town, and that year we won 31 out of 32 games, and I played in the first 17. But when they were out of town, why, I couldn't go, so eventually I lost my spot on the team. And so the last 15 games or so, I didn't play.
Just like a new one, always working.
Yeah, I had a job to do.
That's true.
Well, there wasn't that much money, and Dad worked, and his pay wasn't that much, and he had to run his truck. And time he got through paying for his gas and oil in his truck, and he didn't have that much left. And of course, there's a lot of us to eat, and so that's why we managed that way.
Well, a question on here that I didn't come up with, and we may not stay on it very long, but do you remember any fads from your youth when you were growing up? Popular hairstyles or just trends?
Well, there's a difference in, you had your hair, you used, I can't remember, it'd be sure look odd today because you took Brilliantine, which was just olive oil with a smell to it, and you put that all over your hair, and then you combed your hair straight down one side and straight down the other side. And sometimes the boys would part their hair in the middle and comb it straight down each side, and that sometimes the Brilliantine or the oil, hair oil, would drip all down on your shoulders. Good.
So that's the greasers,
very greasers, yeah. And then later on, though, it got into a point where when we got up in high school, they cut it all off, a burr cut, and you had a kind of a, wasn't a clay-like substance, but anyway, it came in a kind of a tube, and you'd twist it out and put it on your hair, and then comb your hair, and your hair just stand straight up like porcupine quills. And so
that was the look later on.
That was the later one, yeah. And then we had hats. You had we wear hats now that, or we wear hats then. Some people might even wear them now. I got one back there, but it doesn't feel right. And and that was about the only unique thing. But there came a time, though, I remember when I was about a sophomore, that the thing was that you wore your shirt outside of your pants, and that was the thing. That you was in style if you had it like that.
But before you always tucked your shirt in?
You always had, you couldn't leave the house before you tucked your shirt in. Tuck your shirt in, You got the orders on that.
Well, looking back, who were some of your childhood heroes that you could think of, people that you enjoyed watching growing up?
Well,
I guess it's hard with that TV.
Yeah, there wasn't too many. Well, they was we got to watch Tom Mix, which was a cowboy. I liked them. And then when I was running the theaters, why all those Western characters would, they'd come and they'd have their show, and they got a percent of the gate or whatever. And we had Roy Rogers and Trigger. He was there, and then I think what his sidekick's name was, that fat guy talked with a gravel voice. And then Cannonball Dub Taylor, he came with some cowboy, Charles Starrett, I believe, and he stayed up in my booth all the time that the movies was running. We'd run the movies, and then we'd have the cowboy show. They'd come in and bring their horses up on the stage and make them do tricks and whatever, and it was an interesting thing. But he stayed there. He stayed in my projection booth all the time that the movies was running. Then he'd go out and he'd do his thing, his performance.
So at the movie theater, after the movie played, there would be a cowboy who came on stage and did a routine with a horse.
Yeah. Well, they could make them stand up on their hind legs, and it looked like they're going to jump out into the audience because the audience was within 2 or 3 feet. Actually, it was a dangerous situation, but nobody ever.
I'd say.
Can't remember anybody ever getting hurt because of the horses.
That's something to picture there.
Yeah.
Well, what were your favorite songs or music when you were growing up?
Oh, we had one song that I believe it's Moonlight Serenade. And every night at 11 o'clock or 10:30, whatever specific time, while they'd play that. And I remember going to sleep because Everett and I had a little radio in our room that we'd turn it down real low. And we'd listen to that. And I remember going to sleep every night listening to Moon River, is the name of it. And you don't remember that song.
I think there's something about that song.
You heard that? Well, it was popular then.
I think it's still pretty famous.
And this Chicago station, I believe it's Chicago, yeah, that's what they signed off on, Moon River. And I know who sung it too. I could see his face. I can't think of it. Anyway.
Well, did you all have any household pets?
Well, we always had, seemed like we always had a dog. And I was telling you about about the dog at
Bill's dog.
Bill's dog. But now, old Shep, he got shot. He got mad. Well, I think he got bit by a hydrophobic skunk or something like that, because he's always out hunting in the woods, and he probably tangled with a mad dog there.
How did he get the name Shep?
He was a shepherd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not too original.
Well, I was thinking of the Three Stooges.
No, oh yeah, Shep. No, he was a shepherd dog, and he was. And then we've always had pets. I mean, when our boys grew up, we always had. Sugar was one old dog we had, and
Sugar.
Do you remember
Sugar was in all the pictures, right?
Yeah, Sugar's one that got. He was a camera hound. I'm telling you, if a camera came out, here comes Sugar, and he laid down to get his picture made all the time. But we've always had our boys growing up. We always had a dog and cat. Ruie always liked cats, and so she had a cat. But they seemed to get along very well. Seemed like I don't remember any conflicts between the animals. But we didn't have any exotic pets. Well, I remember a long time ago when Bill had one. It was he had a skunk that was had been doctored so that his stink particles of him was taken out, and somebody had done that and they sold him. So he bought this little skunk and he carried it around with him and kept it with him all the time, and it didn't smell. And then one of the boys, I can't remember, it wasn't me, it was somebody else. We lived upstairs, and he said, "Ooh, this thing stinks," and he threw it down the stairs and killed it. That didn't work too well with Bill either.
Skunk.
Bill didn't like his pet skunk being killed.
What church did the family attend when you were growing up?
Well, we went to the Methodist church, and I had, my Sunday school teacher was a lady named Mrs. Black, and I got to know her very well. And then I grew up into the next class, which was Henry Wilhoit's mother's was a teacher, Kitty Wilhoit. She was my teacher there. But I changed churches in an unusual way. When we got married, Ruie and I went to church, and I said, well, we go to Methodist church, being the dominant male, you know.
No, sure.
And so we went to the Methodist church, and of course they put her in a class with teenage girls, and put me in a class with a bunch of moss heads who was at least 65 and 70 years old. And then I found out that the Christian church had a class of, win-a-couple class, they called them. And the couples sat together in that. So I started going down there, and eventually I joined the church down there.
And so the small groups had a lot to do with...
Yeah, it had a lot to do with it. Because, well, it was just uncomfortable, really, for a married girl to be in a well, it's almost a junior, it wasn't a junior high, but it was a high school class. And it was uncomfortable for me to be in there with the ancients. And so it worked out better if we just went our own way. And so we got involved in the church in Grayson, Christian church. and all of our youngsters was brought up in the church. As a matter of fact, John was, when I think he said when he was 17 years old, when he graduated from high school, he'd missed one day, one Sunday of Sunday school, and that includes his first one. He was there his first Sunday of his life, and he'd missed one Sunday, and that was because of measles or something. I don't know.
We got that picture of him with the measles.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. He missed that Sunday. That was the only Sunday he missed in all the time he'd gone to school.
That's something else. It has on here, what world events had the most impact on you while you were growing up?
That's not too hard to figure.
That's the Great Depression, right?
Well, the Depression had a certain amount, but people, we had a sufficient amount to eat. Now it wasn't high on the hog, although we raised 1 or 2 hogs a year, and we killed them, and we ground up the whatever in the sausage, and kept that in the cellar. So we had some meat most of the time to make gravy out of. So the Depression was harder on the older folks maybe than us, because we had plenty to eat, and then we raised our own corn, and we'd take it down to the mill, and the mill would grind it up for you into meal for 50% of it. They took half of it for the grinding. So we'd go to the mill, and we'd take a 25-pound bag, and maybe a couple, 3 times in a year, and then we'd shell the corn and clean it, and then when we got enough, we'd go down and crush it, and we'd make it. We had cornbread. Now, sometimes the older folks had biscuits, which was a delight. And then on Sundays, we had biscuits with gravy. So that was, don't sound like much, but yeah, it's something you look forward to if you don't get it.
So if you were to think back to a typical family dinner with all the kids, what was that like?
Well, everybody sat in their place. Dad had his place, exactly where he sat on that off corner there, right, coming off of the kitchen. And Mom sat at the head of the table so she could dole out whatever. Then each one of us had our own place that we sat at the table. And we went all the way around it, and we didn't talk at the table except anything that had to do with food. You could say, pass me the beans or pass me the potatoes, but you couldn't go into any long-winded tale about what you done yesterday or going to do tomorrow.
I guess it just, with so many people at the table, that would get out of hand if somebody lost interest and decided to tell a story.
That's true. So we didn't, when he did that, Dad turned around and looked at him. Never said a word, but he just looked at him and you shut up. You knew when to shut up.
So did your dad or mom ever were they allowed to talk at the table?
They talked among themselves, but we weren't allowed to. The kids weren't allowed to talk. We waited till we got through and run outside and did our conversation. So we weren't allowed to talk at the table.
That's something.
And we had benches, there wasn't chairs. We had benches down one side, and Dad sat on one end of the bench, and then about 4 would sit down there, and then across the end would be a couple, and then back up the other side. We managed to all eat at one time, and most of the time we had company. Now that's another thing that's not happening now. Now, when you have a family dinner, you get the kids in, feed them, and get them out of the way.
Right.
And then the adults sit down and eat. As it was, you put the kids outside like you would the chickens or the dogs. And then when you got through eating, when the adults got through eating, the kids got to come in. Because I remember we had a kind of a cousin, I think it was, came over from Ashland. And on Sunday dinner, and she stood outside the window and watched, and all the chicken was being depleted from the chicken plate. And she hollered, yeah, she hollered in, save me a leg, save me a leg, Well, she got corrected for that. And
that is something.
The children didn't have that much voice in the government at that time. They listened.
But you always ate dinner together as a family every night.
We always ate dinner, and even during the weeks, in a week while they'd ring the bell, and everybody would come in, and you had to be there on time, or you got scolded pretty bad. And we got in, we ate, because after the meal was over, you didn't come in a half hour later and say, I'm hungry. Well, we'll eat supper about 5 o'clock or something like that. So it was orderly, you might say, and probably more orderly than it is nowadays, because the children have a lot of dominance in around the family meal now, and before they didn't talk unless they was asking for something to eat.
Well, did your mother cook all the meals by herself, or did the daughters help? Or?
Mom cooked most of everything. Lacey was a helper on that, but she did a lot of. They'd put on the stove and just build a fire under it, and they put certain kinds of wood. You know, linwood is a fast burning, a hot burning, and if they wanted a hot, fast fire, why they'd use linwood, which is a form of poplar. Now it burned fast and burned hot, but then if they was wanting it, to cook the beans, which was plentiful, why they'd put in an oak log or a piece of an oak, whatever, put it down in the firebox, and it burned longer.
What were your favorite foods?
Favorite foods was getting up to get the biscuits. Now that was some of the best food we had. But we had we went out, and the olders, Dad and the older boys, they'd shoot rabbits and squirrels, and we had rabbit and squirrel, and we killed hogs. We had meats, and then we put up the beans and the corn and the sausage and whatever we had, and then we gathered eggs. So we weren't without food substance. We had a lot of we had variety, and it was good. The food was.
How were the holidays celebrated in the family, as far as Christmas?
Well, Christmas was celebrated as a Christmas day, but other days, maybe Thanksgiving, why you would shut down most of the work around the farm. But other than that, why one day was about like another.
But Christmas and Thanksgiving were stood out as.
They was outstanding because we did stop the works on the farm, and of course you had to feed the stock and all that sort of thing. Turn the cattle out and go get them and bring them back, and go feed the hogs and chickens and whatever.
Get some eggs.
Get the eggs. But that would have to happen regardless of the day. But there was no hoeing the corn or plowing or whatever, chopping. Now a lot of time was spent chopping the stove wood. In the fall of the year, they'd get out there in the chip yard, and they'd chop up. We had a crosscut saw, but most times they would cut the wood in lengths that would go in the fireplace, and so it took a lot of work and took a lot of time involved in that. But the older ones did that. We didn't get the access. Afraid we might chop each other probably. But I really, when we left the farm, I wasn't old enough to swing an axe very heavy. And I can't remember Everett doing that either. So I think it's Bill and Jim and Dad, and then of course we had some uncles that generally showed up in the wintertime and stayed a while. Uncle Arthur and Uncle Pat and Uncle Clyde. They always came in, and sometimes they'd come in time to chop some wood, and then they'd sit, when it got cold they couldn't go out and hunt or work, while they'd sit around the fireplace and play sit back, which is a card game. Now they played that, we didn't. But I remember the adults playing that.
Well, this is a question I put on the list. Wasn't a suggested question, so it's just a funny question. But did you ever sit on Santa's lap?
No, I don't think so.
Well, when's the first time you remember seeing somebody dressed up as Santa?
Well, when we moved into town and we lived there on Horde Street, why, I think one day I might have seen him uptown around one of the stores, and that's about the only time I remember. Well, and in the church we had, we'd go to church on Christmas Eve, and they'd give you a poke, a sack of candy with an orange and an apple in it, and everybody got one regardless.
Did you know this is the first year they didn't do that at the First Church of Christ?
Is that right? Why didn't they do that?
I don't know, but my dad told me this is the first year they're not doing the goodie bag or the poke.
Well, that's unusual. They broke a long tradition.
Yeah, it's strange.
Because we did it down there. Because I filled them sacks and set and I used to take Hebe one and then Mamaw Hall. You know, it lived across the street from us there, right by where Bob and Kelly's office is.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. Between their office and the creek, that house there.
Yep.
She lived there, and I always took them one, and I think I'd carry out 5, because I had different people that I'd carry them to.
Did the family have any special traditions? As far as like we do our Thanksgiving thing, I don't think every family has as good a Thanksgiving get together as we do.
I don't think it was any annual, but now in the summertime, why Dad would put some hay on the truck, and we'd the kids would get on the truck, and maybe the neighbors. There's a family called Peaceheimers that lived back in the holler, lived on our farm, and kind of a sharecrop thing, and they went with us, and sometimes Leonard Howard and his wife was Farlene, and then different ones. A lot of times, I had a big fat uncle that lived in Ashland. He'd come out on a motorcycle. He was a policeman, and he always got there in time to eat. And he and his wife, he had 2 daughters that was hungry folks, really. And so the family would get on a truck. We'd go to caves. We'd go out to the, well, actually, most of the time we went to Cascade Caves because the Carter Caves was less developed then than the Cascade was. So we'd go to Cascade Caves and we'd get down in that, where it's now, a bomb shelter. Now, you know that big cave there in front where it's open up? I can't think. It's right down from where the concession stand was, or the restaurant-like thing. And anyway, we'd sit down in there, and they had tables out. And
the big archway, the
yeah,
opening?
Yeah, you remember that one?
Yeah.
Well, now sometimes we get down in there, of course you get out of the weather when you're down in there. But if the weather was good, then we'd sit out at the tables, and then they'd sit around our table, and then another family probably that you knew would sit over to another table, and there was a lot of people came out there on a Sunday and had their meal there. And then we get back on a truck and drive back home and take care of the stock, and everything came back to normal again.
Well, do you want to take a break, or you okay?
Pardon?
You want to take a break, or you want to keep going?
No, that's all right.
Who is the oldest relative that you can remember?
Well, my grandmother, I remember very well because she was Cyrilda Rose Daniels was her name, and she was Mom's mother, and she was a stickler for detailed English, and she would ask us to mail a letter. She wouldn't say go mail a letter, she'd ask us to go post the letter, and instead of saying now don't dawdle along on your way, she'd say do not tarry. so she spoke in precise. And she lived, well, she died when I was in service, 43. So, but she lived with us because Granddad got killed in an accident over around Ashland. He's working on the railroad, I think, and I can't remember, but he got killed there. And of course she was born in 1860, maybe 1861. Well, no, then I had another great uncle who lived down Sandy there. Mean people. I can't think of what their names are now. But anyway, it's an older one I remember, my great uncle. And on the Newland side, see, my granddad died when he was 28 years old. And that's Dad's dad. Because Dad was 8 years old when he had to take over and manage the family and keep it. And that's pretty young to have their responsibility of a family. But I don't remember too many real older ones.
I tell you what, let's take a break for a second.
Okay.
This might be our lunch appointment.